My mother was 6 hours into emergency brain surgery when my aunt sent me a text asking for $4,500 for my cousin's engagement party deposit. I sent her 1 penny. Then I spent the rest of that night in a hospital waiting room, taking back every single thing I had ever given them. I want you to hear every detail of how this happened. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss how it ends. And drop a comment, where in the world are you watching from right now? There is a specific kind of silence that lives inside a hospital at 2 in the morning. It is not peaceful. It is the silence of machines breathing for people who can't, of nurses speaking in low codes, of fluorescent lights buzzing over linoleum that has seen too much. I know that silence intimately now. I sat inside it for 9 hours. My mother's name is Ruth. She is 61 years old, and she makes the best sweet potato pie in the state of Georgia, and she has never once in her life asked me for a single thing she didn't absolutely need. She raised me alone after my father died when I was 11, working double shifts at the school district office, packing my lunch every single morning, even through high school when I told her she didn't have to. She is the most quietly strong person I have ever known. So when my phone rang at 11:45 on a Tuesday night, and the voice on the other end told me she had collapsed in her kitchen and been rushed to Emory with a brain aneurysm, the entire floor dropped out of my world. I was in my apartment in Charlotte. I had an early morning client call, a presentation half finished on my second monitor, and a glass of wine I had not even started yet. I grabbed my car keys, my laptop bag, and my phone charger, and I drove 4 hours to Atlanta in the dark without stopping once. I want to be clear about what I do for work, because it matters to what comes later. I am a network security engineer. I spend my days inside the architecture of other people's systems, finding the vulnerabilities, patching the gaps, controlling access. I know exactly who can get into what, and exactly how to make sure they can't anymore. It is a skill set I built over a decade of late nights and certifications, and up until that Tuesday, I had mostly used it for clients. That night, I started thinking about using it for something else. I arrived at the hospital at 4:15 the morning, and spoke to a resident who had kind eyes and a very careful way of choosing words. He told me my mother had a ruptured cerebral aneurysm, that the surgical team was already working, that it was a complex procedure, that it could take anywhere from 6 to 10 hours, that I should make myself as comfortable as possible, and that he would find me the moment there was news. I found a chair in the neurosurgical waiting room. It was gray with metal armrests, and the padding had been compressed into something close to concrete from years of other people sitting in it and waiting, just like I was sitting and waiting. I set my phone on my knee, and I texted my Aunt Carol. Mom is in emergency brain surgery at Emory. Aneurysm, it could be a very long night. Please pray for her. My Aunt Carol is my father's sister. She is 54 years old, and she has lived in the same house in Decatur for 30 years. A house for which she pays a mortgage she has never once been late on because, for the past 7 years, I have been the one paying it. This is not a metaphor. My name is on the auto-pay. My card is the one on file. It started after my father died, the way these things always do, gradually, with a reason that made sense at the time. My Aunt Carol was the one who drove me to the grief counselor when my mom was working. She was the one who showed up to my 8th grade graduation with a disposable camera and cried like I had won the Nobel Prize. When I got my first real job out of college and found out she was behind on her electricity bill, paying it felt like the right thing to do. It felt like family. The problem with doing the right thing quietly is that it teaches people to expect it. Over the years, the electricity became the electric plus the gas plus the internet. The internet became a family cell phone plan my aunt, my cousin Derek, and eventually Derek's rotating cast of girlfriends, all under my account. When Derek was 22 and needed a credit card to get his credit started, my aunt asked me to add him as an authorized user on my emergency card. I did. When Derek needed just a little help with a used car he'd found, I co-signed. When my aunt's refrigerator died, I replaced it. When Derek's latest business idea, he had been cycling through them for years, each one more vague than the last required a laptop, I bought it and called it an early Christmas present. I had told myself it was investment, that one day Derek would get his footing and they would be okay on their own. What I had not properly accounted for was Vanessa. Vanessa entered Derek's life 8 months before the night my mother had her aneurysm. She was 28, originally from somewhere in the Midwest, and she had the particular polished confidence of a person who has never been told no in a way that stuck. She was pretty in a sharp, calculated way, and within 2 weeks of meeting Derek, she had redecorated his bedroom, given him a new haircut, and started referring to my family as Derek's people, in a tone that made it sound like a project she had taken on. I met her once, at a birthday dinner my aunt threw for Derek in January. Vanessa spent the first 20 minutes asking me very specific questions about my job title, my company, and whether I worked remotely. She spent the next 20 minutes telling me about her vision for her and Derek's future, which involved a condo downtown, a joint business venture she was deliberately vague about, and a wedding that she referred to as a brand event. She had not been dating my cousin for 3 months. Before the dinner was over, she had pulled me aside near the hallway bathroom with a glass of rosé in one hand and a very particular smile on her face. "I just want you to know," she said, "how much Derek talks about you. You're basically his big sister. He really looks up to you." She paused. "It means a lot that you've been so supportive of this family, especially financially. You've really held things together." She took a sip of her wine and looked at me with those flat, evaluating eyes. "We're going to need people like you in our corner when things really start moving for us. People like you." I smiled and said nothing, and filed that sentence in a place I did not forget. At 6:00 the morning in the waiting room, my coffee had gone cold and my phone was at 52%. I had heard nothing from my aunt. I texted the family group chat my aunt, Derek, and my mother's sister, Patricia, who was driving up from Macon and had already replied twice to ask if I needed anything. Nothing from my aunt or Derek. Not a like, not a prayer hands emoji, nothing. At 9:00 the morning, I walked to the cafeteria and ate half a yogurt standing at a counter. A nurse I recognized from the floor stopped to tell me the surgery was progressing. No complications so far. I thanked her with a voice I barely recognized as my own. I checked my phone. My aunt had posted to Facebook at 8:47 It was a photo of her backyard garden, blooming in the February warmth. The caption said, "God is good, all the time. Sunshine and blessings this morning." Derek had posted to Instagram at 9:03 a.m. He and Vanessa were at a brunch restaurant. I recognized the one on Peachtree, with the 3-hour wait and the bottomless mimosas. Vanessa was holding a glass up to the camera. Derek had his arm around her. The caption said, "She said yes, grateful for this woman and our future. Big things coming." And he had tagged the restaurant's location, which was 11 miles from where I was sitting alone in a gray chair waiting to find out if my mother was going to survive. I put my phone face down on my knee. I looked at the painting on the wall across from me. It was a generic landscape, a lake, some trees, the kind of painting chosen specifically because it would offend no one and move no one and ask nothing of the person looking at it. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about the 9-year-old version of myself standing at my father's funeral, trying very hard not to cry, because my aunt had said, quietly, that my mother needed me to be strong right now. I thought about every payment I had made quietly, every time I had told myself it was fine, it was family, this is what you do. I thought about Vanessa's flat eyes, saying, "People like you." My Aunt Patricia arrived at 11:30 with a tote bag containing a thermos of real coffee, a turkey sandwich in foil, a phone charger, and a small lavender hand lotion, because she said hospital air is brutally dry, and she was not wrong. She sat beside me and held my hand, and we didn't talk much, and it was exactly what I needed. At 2:17 the afternoon, the surgeon came to find me. He was tall, older, with silver at his temples, and the unhurried steadiness of a man who had delivered news like this many times and understood the weight of every word. He sat down across from me, which I registered as a good sign. He said my mother had done remarkably well. He said the aneurysm had been fully clipped. He said there was some expected swelling, and she would be in the ICU for monitoring, but that barring any complications, her prognosis was genuinely good. He said she was a strong woman. I put my face in my hands and cried in a way I had not cried since I was 11 years old. Aunt Patricia rubbed my back. The surgeon waited. When I looked up, he handed me a box of tissues from the side table and smiled like he understood that this was not just relief but something much older than that. I was still wiping my eyes when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my Aunt Carol. "Hey baby, heard from Patricia that Ruth is out of surgery. Praise God. Listen, I know the timing is awkward, but Vanessa and Derek just told us about the engagement. Isn't that wonderful? They found a venue, a beautiful garden space for the engagement party. The deposit is due by Friday, or they lose it. It's $4,500. Your cousin really needs this. We all know you're in a position to help. Just send it to Derek's Venmo whenever you get a chance. No rush. No rush." I read the message 3 times. I looked at the timestamp. I looked at the date on the brunch Instagram post. I thought about 11 miles. I thought about 9 hours. I thought about a woman who had packed my lunch every morning even when I told her she didn't have to, currently lying in an ICU with a titanium clip in her brain. And then something happened that I can only describe as a door closing very quietly and very permanently inside me. I was not angry the way I expected to be. I was not shaking. I was precisely calm in the way I get calm when I am sitting in front of a client's compromise system and I understand exactly what has happened and exactly what needs to happen next. I was in analyst mode, and what I was analyzing was 7 years of outgoing payments that had never once been matched by a single inbound unit of care. I opened my banking app. I found my Aunt Carol's contact. I typed the amount, $0.01. In the memo line, I wrote, "Contribution to the future." I hit send. Then I opened my laptop, connected to my phone's hotspot, and got to work. My Aunt Patricia looked at me. "You okay, honey?" "I will be," I said. And I meant it in a way that surprised me. The first thing I addressed was the cell phone plan. I am the account holder on a family plan that covers 4 lines my own, my Aunt Carol's, Derek's, and a line I had added 2 years ago when Derek said his girlfriend at the time needed help. That girlfriend had been gone for a year. The line still ran. I logged into the carrier portal. Account holder, Simone, lines active, 4. I began the process of separating my aunt's line and Derek's line from my account and converting them to standalone plans. Standalone, basic, pay as you go. I was methodical about it. I was not cruel about it. I simply removed my card as the payment method and sent each number a carrier notification that their billing had been updated and a payment method was required to maintain service. The notification would arrive the next time they tried to use their phones. That would be soon. Vanessa was the kind of person who was never more than 10 minutes from her phone. Next, the credit card. The emergency card I had opened 7 years ago that had, in the time since, funded a flat-screen television, a weekend trip to Savannah, multiple restaurant dinners I was never invited to, 3 pairs of Jordans that showed up on Derek's Instagram, and a spa day that appeared on my statement under Serenity Wellness and Body, charged $380. I logged in. Current balance, $9,200. I looked at the recent charges. Derek and Vanessa's brunch this morning, $214. I closed my eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then I paid the balance in full from my checking account, which hurt, and clicked Remove Authorized User for Derek and Remove Authorized User for Carol, and submitted both requests. Done. The utilities, my aunt's house. I had set up autopay for the electric, the gas, and the water years ago because she had called me crying about a disconnect notice, and I had said give me the account number and just never given it back. I logged into each utility portal. Cancel autopay. Cancel autopay. Cancel autopay. The accounts would remain active. The bills would still come. She would simply have to pay them herself, which is a thing adults do, which she was entirely capable of doing. The streaming services. I was on 6 of them between my own personal subscriptions and the family arrangements I had allowed to accumulate. Netflix, Hulu, the Disney Bundle, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, and a music streaming service. I went through each one. For Netflix, I removed the profiles belonging to Carol and Derek and Vanessa, who had apparently added herself sometime in the last month. For Amazon, I changed the password, and removed the saved shipping addresses I recognized as theirs. For the others, I either removed household members or, where it was simpler, just changed the password outright. I was not performing any of this. I was not imagining their faces. I was simply doing an audit of an account portfolio that had been operating at a total loss and making the necessary corrections. It took me 2 hours. Aunt Patricia fell asleep in the chair beside me. The waiting room was quiet. A Family Feud rerun played silently on the television mounted to the wall. I closed my laptop at 4:45 the afternoon, exactly as a nurse came to tell me my mother was awake and asking for me. I walked down the hall to the ICU and stood at the door and looked at my mother through the glass before I went in. She had tubes and monitors and a wrap around her head, and she looked smaller than she ever has in my entire life. But her eyes were open. And when she saw me through the glass, she lifted one hand, very slowly, just a few inches off the blanket, and moved her fingers in a small wave. And I pressed my hand flat against the glass, and I could not move for a moment. When I went in, she could not speak well yet. The swelling would make that hard for a few days, but she squeezed my hand. I sat beside her, and I talked to her quietly about nothing. I told her about the drive. I told her the surgeon had great hands, you could just tell. I told her I had found a sweet potato pie recipe online that claimed to be the best in Georgia, and I was deeply skeptical, but we were going to test it together when she got home. She squeezed my hand again. Her eyes were tired, but they were there. They were so entirely, fully there. I did not tell her about the text from my aunt. I did not tell her about any of it. I just sat with her until the nurse said visiting hours were ending, and I had to go. I was in the parking garage, keys in my hand, when my phone erupted. It was not one call. It was a cascade. 6 missed calls from my Aunt Carol in the span of 12 minutes. A string of texts, with the spelling errors that appear when someone is typing very fast and very emotionally. Simone, what did you do to my phone? It says I owe money. My Netflix isn't working. Derek says his card was declined at the gas station. What is going on? Call me right now. This is not funny. Derek is stranded. He needs gas money. Can you put money on his card? Oh wait, the card doesn't work. Simone. Call me. This is a crisis. Not my mother's aneurysm. A gas station. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. I listened to the parking garage. I thought about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. Then I called her back. She picked up before the first ring had even finished. Simone, oh my God, finally. Something is wrong with everything. My phone almost didn't work. It said I need to update my payment, and the Netflix is gone. All our profiles are gone. And Derek, hi, Aunt Carol, I said. Don't hi, Aunt Carol me. What is going on? I made some changes to the accounts, I said. My voice was even. This was my presenting to the board voice, the one that does not rise or fall regardless of the temperature in the room. I removed you and Derek from the cell plan and the credit card. The streaming profiles are gone too. There was a silence. Then, why would you do that? You can't just Afton. Her voice pitched upward. Those are our accounts. We depend on those. They were my accounts, I said. I was paying for them. I've been paying for them for years. Because you're family, she said. And the way she said it was not gratitude. It was explanation. As if this was simply the established order of things. We're family, Simone. You know how tight things are for us. I know, I said. I've known for a long time. I've been the one making sure things weren't too tight. For 7 years. And today, while my mother, your sister-in-law, the woman who was there when my father died and helped plan his funeral, was in a 9-hour brain surgery, you were posting about your garden, and your son was at brunch, 11 miles away. And then you texted me for $4,500. The silence this time was different. Heavier. I didn't know it was going to be that long, she said. It's not like we could do anything sitting in a waiting room. I could, I said. I was, for 9 hours, alone. Except for Aunt Patricia, who drove 2 hours. But I understand. Waiting rooms are uncomfortable. Simone, that is not fair. $4,500 for an engagement party. Aunt Carol, while I did not know if my mother was going to wake up, Derek is only engaged once, she said. This is his moment. Vanessa has a whole vision for. I sent you a penny, I said. That's the budget I have for Derek's future right now. As for everything else, the electric, the gas, the water, those auto pays are gone too. You'll need to set those up in your own name. I can walk you through it if you need help. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a word that wasn't formed yet. You turned off the utilities? Simone, you cannot. This is our home. Your uncle co-signed on that. My uncle has been gone for 12 years, I said quietly. And I've been paying the mortgage on that house for 6. Not co-signing. Paying. My card. Every month. I haven't touched the mortgage yet. I'm not going to put you out of your home. But I'm done managing what happens inside it. This is Derek's fiancé's influence, she hissed. She has put ideas in your head. She never liked you. I almost laughed. Vanessa and I have met once. She asked me about my salary. We don't have a relationship, Aunt Carol. Then why are you punishing us? We're grieving too, Simone. Ruth is family. Then act like it, I said, and I hung up. I sat in the parking garage for a long time after that, not crying, not shaking, breathing slowly and watching the concrete column in front of my car and noticing, with some distant, clinical part of my mind, that I felt lighter than I had in years. Like something had been sitting on my sternum for so long, I had stopped noticing the weight until the exact moment it lifted. My phone buzzed again. I expected my aunt. It was Aunt Patricia. I heard the whole thing through the door, honey. I'm proud of you. Get some sleep. Ruth is going to be fine. And I've got her in the morning. I closed my eyes and rested my head on the steering wheel and allowed myself 30 seconds of just feeling it, the relief, the exhaustion, the clean, cold, clarifying feeling of a decision made that could not be unmade. Then I started the car and drove to the hotel 3 blocks away and slept for 10 hours straight. The response from Derek came the next morning in the form of a long email with a subject line that said simply, "Seriously." The content was what I expected. I was jealous of his happiness. I was sabotaging his relationship. I had always resented him because I never had a normal childhood, and I couldn't stand to see him thriving. He demanded I restore all accounts immediately, transfer the $4,500 plus an additional $500 for the inconvenience, and apologize to Vanessa, who he said had done nothing but try to embrace this family. I read the email twice. Then I pulled up the background research I had done the night before, because I am a network security engineer, and old habits and databases that my company subscribes to are formidable things. Vanessa's digital footprint was illuminating. She had no consistent employment history. She had 2 civil court filings against her in the past 3 years for unpaid debts to vendors, one a florist, one a small event space. She had a blog that had not been updated in 2 years about lifestyle entrepreneurship. She had a pattern, visible once you knew where to look, of short-term relationships with men who appeared, from their social media, to be financially comfortable. My cousin Derek, whose lifestyle appeared comfortable because I had been funding it for years, had been a very appealing target. That was the piece that stopped being funny. I had been protecting the wrong person. The confirmation came at 10:48 that morning, while I was at the hospital eating a granola bar outside my mother's ICU room, waiting for the attending to finish his rounds. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me. It was the fraud department at my bank. They had flagged an attempt to add a new account holder to my primary checking account. Not the emergency card, my main account, the one my direct deposit hit, the one with my savings, the emergency fund I had built over a decade. The attempt had come via phone. The caller had given my Aunt Carol's name and passed the first-level security questions: my date of birth, my childhood street address. But when the representative asked for the one-time passcode sent to my registered phone number, the caller had not been able to provide it. Because my phone was in my hand, and I had not received a call asking me to share any codes. The representative confirmed that no access had been granted. They had flagged the account, upgraded the security tier, and were recommending I update my password and security questions immediately, which I had already begun doing before she finished the sentence. I sat with that information for a while. My Aunt Carol had given someone my childhood street address, my date of birth, Information you give to someone you trust, or someone who has talked you into trusting them. And that someone had been trying to get inside my primary checking account on the morning after I cut off the credit card. Vanessa had not been embracing this family. She had been mapping it. I thought about what she had said to me at the birthday dinner. People like you. I thought about how quickly she had inventoried my apartment that night, the assessor's eyes moving over every surface. I thought about the email Derek had sent this morning, the phrasing she had clearly written, the language so much smoother and more calculated than anything my cousin had ever produced on his own. She had been managing him from the beginning. My family, poorly organized and financially overextended, had looked like an opportunity. And I, the one with the stable income and all the account access, had been the actual target. I went back to my mother's room. She was more alert today. The doctor said the swelling was reducing ahead of schedule. She could form words now, slow and careful, and the first full sentence she said to me, holding my hand with both of hers, was, "You look tired, baby. You're not sleeping enough." I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in days. "I'm okay, Mom," I said. "I had some things to take care of, but I'm okay." She studied my face for a moment the way she has studied my face since I was born, reading things I don't always say. Then she nodded, slow and satisfied, as if she had understood something I hadn't explained. "Good," she said. "Good." 2 days later, I was back at my apartment in Charlotte when the call came. It was Derek, not an email. His actual voice. He sounded like he hadn't slept. The bravado from the email was gone. He asked if I had time to talk. I said yes. He asked, and the question was halting and quiet. Nothing like his usual register. He asked me if what I had said about Vanessa was true. If I had actually done a background check. I told him I had. I told him what I'd found. The debts, the civil judgments, the failed businesses, the pattern. I did not editorialize. I just gave him the information the way I would give a client a security report. Here is what the data shows. Here are the access points that were compromised. Here is where the vulnerability entered the system. There was a long silence. "She called my mom," he said finally. "She asked my mom for your bank information. She said it was so she could. She said it was to help coordinate a surprise for you. As a thank you." His voice cracked slightly at the edges. "I thought she was planning something for you. I thought she genuinely liked you." "I know," I said. And I meant it not as absolution, but as fact. He had been played to. "She's gone," he said. "She left 3 days ago. Took the stuff she'd brought to my apartment." A pause. "I owe you money, Simone. I've owed you money for years. I don't even know the total." "You don't need to worry about a total right now," I said. "I do," he said. "I think I do." Another pause. "How's Aunt Ruth?" "She's good," I said. "She's going to be good." "I should have called," he said. "I should have called the day she went in. I'm sorry. I didn't say it was fine, because it wasn't." I said, "Yeah, you should have." And then I let the quiet sit there, because some things need to be heard, and not immediately smoothed over. My Aunt Carol did not call. She sent one text 3 weeks later that said, "I hope you know you've torn this family apart." I read it, put my phone in my pocket, and went back to the meal I was cooking. I did not respond. I have not responded since. There is nothing to say that the silence doesn't already cover. The slower things came next, the way resolution always does not in a single dramatic scene, but in a quiet accumulation of small different mornings. The column in my budget that used to read Family Assist was gone. The number that had lived there every month for 7 years now sat in a high-yield savings account. The low-level hum of anxiety I had carried, the background static of waiting for the next thing to go wrong, the next emergency, the next request, it went quiet. I had not known how loud it was until it stopped. My mother came home 6 weeks after the surgery. I drove down to Atlanta and spent the weekend getting her settled, restocking her kitchen, sitting with her in the backyard in the mild March warmth, while she told me about each plant in the garden by name, as if introducing me to old friends. She moved slowly. She tired easily. But she was there, and she was herself, and she was mine. On the last night before I drove back to Charlotte, she held my hand at the kitchen table and said, in the careful, measured way she had adopted since the surgery. As if each word was worth weighing. You okay? Everything okay? I told her the short version. Not all of it, not the details. Just the fact of it that I had stopped managing things for her sister-in-law's family, that it had not gone smoothly, that I was at peace with it. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, I always felt bad, that you took all that on. I wanted to help, I said. I know, she said, but there's a difference between helping and carrying. I should have said something. She squeezed my hand. You always were the one who held things. Even when you were little. Your father was like that too. We sat with that for a while. Before I left in the morning, she pressed a piece of paper into my hand. I unfolded it in the car. It was a list, her handwriting, still slightly unsteady. It said at the top, places I want to go. Underneath, in a numbered list, New Orleans, Savannah, Charleston, and, with a question mark, Paris, France. I called her from the highway. Mom, I said, Paris doesn't have a question mark. I heard her laugh on the other end, the full real laugh, and I held the phone tighter than I needed to. 4 months after the surgery, her doctor cleared her for travel. Non-strenuous, he said. Take it easy. See the world. She is 61 years old, and she had a titanium clip placed in her brain, and she wants to see Paris. We booked the flights on a Wednesday afternoon with the money that used to disappear every month into a household that never once said thank you. We were somewhere over the Atlantic when she fell asleep in the window seat, with the little airline blanket pulled up to her chin and the city lights of somewhere below us glowing through the dark. I sat beside her and watched her breathe. Even and steady, strong. My phone had a notification, a photo my Aunt Patricia had sent, a selfie of her and my mother at Easter, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I saved it to my camera roll. Then I turned on the little overhead reading light and opened a book, and I stayed there in the quiet hum of the plane, with my mother sleeping next to me, and I felt the particular peace of a person who has finally stopped paying for something that was never truly hers to owe. The people who love you show up. Not when it is convenient, not when they have finished brunch, not when the waiting room situation has improved. They show up at 4:30 inches the morning with a thermos of real coffee and lavender hand lotion, and they sit beside you and hold your hand, and they do not send you a Venmo request 3 days later. I know the difference now. And I will never again confuse the two.